Okay, Hyrox rowing. In this video, we are going to go through everything you need to know about the rowing workout station. The rules, we're going to go through some things to think about technique-wise, and then the common faults that we see and how to overcome them when you are training for the race. Let's dive right in then. So what are the rules you need to be aware of for the row? First things first, when you come into the workout station, you're going to be assigned a lane by a judge. They're going to be stood there waving their hand around as you run into the workout station. Just head to their rower and sit yourself down. You've got 1K to complete, so obviously on your own or split between you however you want if you're in the doubles division. When you finish that row, you cannot leave until you've got the attention of a judge. So when you get to about 920, 950 meters, start making some noise, wave your arm around, grab the attention of a judge. They will give you the thumbs up when you are done, and you can then head off for the next run. New rule for 2024, 2025 is that we can play around with the dampener as much as we want to. Now, obviously, the advice is during your training to figure out what the dampener setting should be. Then when you arrive to the rower, you can set the dampener once and then just leave it be, but the option's there if you need it. Last but not least, if you're in the doubles division, when you are resting, there's going to be a mat right behind the rower. You just need to stand in that or on that mat. You cannot pass the handle to your partner. So when you want to swap over, you, the rowing athlete, needs to put the handle down, jump off and get your partner on afterwards. Okay, technique-wise, now there is an awful lot to think about when it comes to the rower. It's going to be something we need to practice and practice and practice. The ultimate goal for any Hyrox movement is to move with absolute efficiency. Don't waste any energy whatsoever during the workout station. Conserve it all for the run, or in general, we don't want to be leaking energy. Now that starts even before or as you get onto the rower. If you can save yourself a few seconds as you get onto the rower, that is literally free fitness, free time. It doesn't cost you anything fitness-wise to get on the rower efficiently and get off if you're going to sub over in doubles, and you're going to benefit from that. So how do we get onto the rower nice and quickly? As you'll see in the video here, we've got a bit of a movement pattern that we want to practice, and that just involves getting the rower moving nice and quickly, but importantly, getting into a rhythm of rowing as quickly as we can too. As we approach the rower, we're going to sit down. We're going to put one foot in, do a stroke, and then as we recover from that stroke, we're going to get the second foot into the strap. Now, as I'll come on to in just a minute with your rowing technique, you shouldn't need to have your feet anchored into the foot pads by the straps. We should be competent enough in our rowing technique, as you can see with me here, keeping our foot grounded on the foot pad. That said, if you're doing doubles and your partner can mess around with the straps for you, fine, but please practice enough in training so that you don't need to strap your feet down. I'll come on to exactly how that looks. But a good way here of saving a couple of seconds, and again, it just doesn't cost you any fitness to do that. So practice that one if you can. Okay, the rowing technique then. The stroke can be broken down into a few different phases. We've got the catch, which is right at the front of your rowing stroke, where you would be catching the water if you're in a boat, but in this instance, catching the tension on the fan belt. You've got the drive phase and you've got the recovery phase. Your drive phase is where the vast majority of your power is going to be generated. We can break that down into three separate movements. We've got a leg drive that's going to contribute about 60% of your power, your speed on the rower. We've got a back extension that we know contributes about 30%. And then we've got an arm pull that is worth about 10%. So right away, we can see that the majority of your speed is going to be built up on the rower in the first portion of your stroke. Now we can practice segmenting the rowing stroke. It's a little bit awkward, but if we watch the video, we can see those three stages here really distinctly. So we've got the leg drive, the back extension, and the arm pull. Now, obviously, when it comes to rowing, we want these to be as fluid as possible, but it is really important that we get the most out of each of these phases. If 60% of the power is going to be driven with our legs, then we want to make sure that the legs are almost fully extended before we think about extending the back. So as you can see in the video here, I fully extend those legs before I think about hinging at my hip and pulling my shoulders behind me. When I do that, I'm pulling my shoulders back only as far as my lower back can engage the movement or initiate the movement. I'm not going any further than I need to before I then pull with my arms at the end. When I do pull with my arms, I'm pulling in a really strong position. So you can see that my elbows are staying at about 90 degrees. I'm engaging the lats and the lower traps in the movement. And ultimately, I'm just guiding that handle into my stomach, which gives me a cue to then start the recovery phase. That is getting back to the starting point. Let's have a little look at those all in one fluid movement then. So as I mentioned, that movement pattern is legs, back, and then pull. We want to ensure that we're getting everything out of our legs before we think about using the back, and then again before we think about using the arms. A couple of points of performance that we look for when we're on the rower is that we've got a nice vertical shin position in your catch. Now what we're looking for here in our catch position, which you can see on the screen, is for you to be in the optimal position to start your next stroke. And that is going to be a position in which you have engagement through the lats. You've got the ability to drive through the foot plate and the midfoot as quickly as possible. And we've got some sort of engagement through the hamstring, the lower back and the glutes, the posterior chain. Anything further on from this, as we'll see in just a minute in one of our common faults, may well give you extra length in your pull, but ultimately the cost of reaching further forwards and getting back to this optimal start position is going to outweigh the benefit you get from the extra length in your stroke. A really good indicator of whether you are in the right position here is that you're able to maintain a neutral back. So you've got a nice flat back in this position. If you record yourself from the side, you can see excessive rounding through your lower, mid, or upper back. We know that we're overreaching. Again, a relatively good indicator of that is that you have a vertical shin, or that your knee is further away from the rowing screen than your ankle. Lost my train of thought for a second there. Second point of performance that we want to be thinking about is driving your foot through the foot plate. That is a mouthful. What we may see in some athletes, depending on mobility, is the heel lift off of the foot pad in this catch position. Now, that isn't necessarily a problem. Again, if you require that for mobility reasons, that is fine. But we want to instantly think about getting your whole foot on the floor, on the foot pad, as quickly as you can. Imagine we were trying to jump as high as we could. If you tried to jump as high as you could from being on your toes, so if we started by balancing on our toes and then didn't let our heels touch the floor, we just tried to jump from that position, you would nowhere near jump as high as if you started with a flat foot. So getting that foot down onto the foot pad as quickly as possible, flat, and driving through the mid of your foot, the middle of your laces, is going to be the most optimal, most powerful position for you to be driving from. Last but not least, we're going to be thinking about pulling to the ribs, as I just mentioned just a minute ago, making sure that when we are engaging the back and the arms, that we are utilizing them as much as possible. Although they don't contribute a huge amount to the rowing stroke in terms of power output, they are important, and we don't want to be leaking any energy at the back end of that. So let's have a little look at a few more strokes. We're looking for that vertical shin position at the start. The feet stay relatively flat. We're driving through the midfoot, and we're only going as far back as we can keep the position on the rower consistent. Let's have a look at a few common faults then. So the first of which I mentioned or alluded to earlier is overreaching in the handles. So we can see now I've really reached forwards and we've got a huge curve in the lower back. Now, the advantage of this position is that we get extra length in our rowing stroke. But as I mentioned, it comes at a cost. And that cost is I'm really bunched up in this position. It's really hard for me to engage anything in this position. I'm going to have to reorganize myself, get my heels back on the foot pads, straighten out my back, i.e. engage my back muscles, switch on my lats because they're currently switched off because I'm hunched and reaching forwards before I can start producing any sort of power on the rower. Again, key indicators here being that you've got a rounded back and that your knees are further forward than your shins in this position. Let's try and avoid that. Second is what we call the cheeky ab workout. So again, another grasp at extra length on the rower. You can see the athlete here, me, has really leaned back far on the rower. And again, a common thought here is that it gives you extra length in your pull, which it absolutely does, but it costs you a sit-up every single stroke. And you can imagine over the course of the 1,000 meters, we're going to be doing upwards of 100 strokes. You're basically doing an extra 100 sit-ups in the workout. We are not gaining anything from our back in this position at the back past the point at which our shoulders are about 1 o'clock. After that, all of the tension is transferred to your abs in order, or your core, in order to hold the position on the row and not fall off of the back. So again, the cost of that position there outweighs the benefit that you are getting. So again, finishing with those shoulders at about 1 o'clock, just past the hips. Last but not least, we have leading with the shoulders. So earlier on, we learned that the vast majority of the power that you produce on the rower is produced by your legs. If we lead the movement then with our shoulders, as I'm demonstrating in this video here, you can see that my shoulders move first. So I'm thinking about extending my back, using my lower back. It somewhat negates the ability of your legs to produce any sort of power. We've almost skipped a step in our pull. Really common fault here, especially when people are tired. They're trying to leverage their body weight instead of thinking about mechanically producing that power. And it is just costing you power on the rower. In this instance, we're going to really think about driving the heels through the foot pad instead of your toes and leaving the shoulders forward in the first few moments of your pull. And that's just going to delay the point at which your shoulders move back and allow you to produce energy with your legs in the rower. Last but not least, we've got the high pull. You can see this in the same video, that handle coming right up to my chin. Again, it's a grasp at extra length on the rower. We want to utilize as much as we can of our lats and our mid-lower traps in our pull. They're the big muscle groups of the back, upper back, and they allow you to produce far more energy than your upper traps do in this position. You can think about a seated row on a cable machine versus an upright row with, say, a dumbbell. You can seated row far more than you can upright row, and that here transfers into pulling to your rib cage or your belly button, or pulling up to your chin, as you can see in this instance. Once again, all of these refinements, all these 1% improvements are going to all add up to a more efficient, more powerful stroke that's going to get you through that rower much, much faster.